Hey, what's happening, guys? Today I'm going to be adjusting the coilovers on my NC Miata or MX-5 and adjusting the ride height. Let's get into it. Okay, so we got the wheels off, and these are the collars that we need to adjust the ride height as well as preload. Those are the only things that you can adjust with the collars. These particular coilovers, these are Blitz ZZ-Rs. They also have damping adjustment. It's just a single adjuster for both compression and rebound, and that's going to be on the top hats. It's a little knob that you just turn. And to get to that for the rears, I'd have to take out the trim in the trunk and then reach into it from there. But for preload and ride height, this is what we're gonna use. The rear is actually a little bit trickier than the fronts because there are these control arms that get in the way of the wrenches. So on this side, from what I measured, I want to lower the ride height by 9 millimeters. The way I measured that was from the center hub to the top of the fender arch. That's going to be more accurate than measuring from the ground, because if you have differences in tire pressure and things like that, that'll affect your measurements. First thing we do is spray this down with some lubricating spray. I'm using some CRC silicone spray for that. I'm going to be loosening this one here, which is for the height adjustment, which is the lower one. All right, so we just loosened that. Okay, now that's finger loose. I'm going to put it down there where it's slightly finger tight. I mean, I can still undo that with my hands, and then what I'm now gonna do, since the height adjustment is loose, is I'm gonna crank the top collar here clockwise. So I'm bringing the entire assembly down into this almost like a socket. It's a threaded socket, and this entire assembly is gonna screw into it. So before I do that, I wanna take my starting measurement, and I'm just gonna measure from the bottom of this collar to kind of this line between the black seat and the red collar at the top. All right, that's 61 millimeters, and I want to lower it by 9 millimeters. That's going to bring it down to 52 millimeters. I'm going to use a larger wrench, get it on that collar, and that's going to rotate the whole assembly. And before I do that, I've got to loosen that a little bit more. And later when I take my measurement again, I'm just going to screw this back down to where it was. What's tricky about this is that this arm here is in the way, and that's why I can only kind of do small adjustments at a time. Just a little bit more lubricating spray. So I'm happy with that. I'm just gonna tighten up that bottom collar, which is what allows you to do your height adjustment, and we're all done. That's it. Now we're gonna go over to the other side and do the same thing. All right, so I've just done the height adjustments, and I'm now gonna be putting the wheels back on. One thing I like to do with the wheels is with the contact area between the wheel and the hub, I like to put a little bit of high temperature grease on it. That's gonna be similar to brake grease or bearing grease. The reason why I do that is just so that the wheels don't get seized onto the hub. So the next time when you go to take the wheels off, they'll come off nice and easy. The grease I'm using is this here blue stuff by Maxima Racing Oils. It's waterproof grease, it says. And when I went on their website and read their data sheet, this thing can withstand super high temperatures, and it was really good value. I mean, it's pretty cheap for what it is. And I just use an old toothbrush, dip it in here, and brush it on. When you're putting the wheel nuts on, you want to thread them through with your hands first, just to make sure you're not cross-threading them. You should be able to feel them go on nice and smooth. When you're doing up the bolts, make sure you go in a star pattern. So I started with this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then the last one was here. Now we're not done with this yet. We are gonna come back and tighten these up one last time using a torque wrench. But that's gonna be after the car's back down on the ground. So this is a wheel that I just pulled off, and you can see the grease that I put on previously. Over here you can see I put on way too much, and it's kind of just smooshed out and made a bit of a mess. It's okay if you put too much. I mean, it's not really gonna do anything dangerous, but it is gonna be a waste, and it's just gonna make a bit of a mess. So you don't need to use too much. A tiny bit can go a long way, because once you torque the wheel onto the hub, a lot of this is just gonna get smushed out of those gaps, and it's just kind of gonna end up around the edges anyway. So you don't need to use too much. So this here's the front, and as you can see, the collars are much easier to reach. You've got all this space here, nothing getting in your way. And same thing with the lower collar. You've got all this space here to get your wrench in there and move. So much easier to do the fronts than the rears. All right, so we're all done. I'm gonna lower the car. Now the annoying thing about adjusting coilovers is after you've adjusted them, the suspension needs to kind of settle down a little bit. So what you measure after you immediately get the car down isn't gonna be what the ride height and settings all settle in at. So what I'll need to do is drive this car around a little bit. I'm gonna measure it again and see if I need to make any more adjustments. By the way, I'm going to be doing a lot more work on this car, so if you'd like to follow along with me on that journey, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching. Last thing we're going to do, we're going to torque down the nuts using a torque wrench. I always go with 100 Newton meters. Again, make sure you're doing that star pattern to make sure all the nuts are torqued down evenly.